They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Bob Chapman as we explore what's going on in the financial markets. And remember, we do not profess to be financial advisors. We're just telling you what's going on from our point of view. And I'll tell you what, Bob Chapman's been a lot more right than most of our financial advisors. But what you're seeing today in the stock market is what's known as a bear market or a bear trap. And they're trying to get you trapped into that market before they pull the rug out and collapse it down. Why will it collapse more? Well, because the price-earnings ratio certainly are way too high. The earnings reports on our major corporations are going to be down when they come in, and of course they're falsifying some of the earnings like they did with Wells Fargo recently to try to run the market up, but it's all really illusion. It's symbolism over substance, rhetoric over reality. And so with that as the background, let's go to our special guest, Bob Chapman. Hi, Bob. How are you doing?
Well, pretty good, Stan. I'm ready to go today.
All right, fine. Tell us the latest things that our listeners should know about and be concerned about, because,
well, I think, Stan, what you were talking about, and that is the earnings that have come out on Wells Fargo, and what a travesty they are. And now we've got Goldman Sachs coming out and telling us they made $3.59 a share when they just got these flow-through funds, which came through AIG secretly, and of course eventually they were discovered, and among many, many other banks, altogether $101 billion. And that's how they made these earnings. And what happened was that AIG had gone naked on writing derivatives. And because they went under, they had to satisfy the other half of the trade, their half. And that's why all those banks get paid off, because they would have had to take the losses. So the American taxpayer was chosen to be allowed to take those losses. And so that money that illegally went to all those parties, and Goldman Sachs in particular, satisfied the other side of the trade and gave them money which they wouldn't have normally had.
Well, now, why would AIG have
earnings? It's a one-shot deal. Wells Fargo did the same thing. Their Wachovia merger is disastrous. I mean, they're looking at foreclosures coming out of their ears. And so they have hijacked the stock market by coming out with these types of earnings, and they're spacing them to continue to influence the market so the market doesn't go down, and make the Treasury and the Fed's job of having to keep the market up that much easier. And that's why you're seeing the spacing here. If you notice, Wells Fargo came out 2 weeks early with their earnings, which is outrageous. I mean, it's never done. So, you know they're up to something.
I think they said they made something about $10 trillion, something like $10 billion. But Meredith Whitney, and of course you put me on to her, I've been following Meredith very closely. She thinks the bank stocks have a long way to go before they hit bottom. And I think that she probably is very, very well informed about what's really going on. Hang on there, Bob. We'll be back in just a moment here at Radio Liberty. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty. Our guest this afternoon, Bob Chapman. We're talking about what's going on financially. And, of course, I don't know if you've been following the market, but the market's really been doing fairly well. It's gone from about 650, 640, 660 in there, somewhere up to, it was around 800 and 8,000. And then, of course, we have certainly Wells Fargo announcing it made a lot of money, about I don't know how many billions of dollars, but certainly Goldman Sachs has said it's made an amazing profits in the first quarter. Well, of course, those profits really were, of course, the money that was taken from the American tax dollars, because Henry Paulson, who used to work for Goldman Sachs, said, the American investment group AIG is too big to fall. We've got to subsidize it. We've got to give them $30 billion and $80 billion and $20 billion and $40 billion. Give them close to about $180 billion now. And what they did is they simply gave that money to Goldman Sachs, Henry Paulson's old corporation, which he still has stock in, which he made close to $1 billion, I think close to $800 million there, working as a CEO. And this impartial Secretary of the Treasury, of course, now has given all this money to Goldman Sachs, and they're declaring they made a major profit. Well, after all, if somebody gave you $12.5 billion, don't you think you'd be able to show a profit? I mean, why isn't anybody pointing out that Henry Paulson was not an impartial individual, that Henry Paulson should be, I believe, of course, indicted for fraud, for giving money to his old company? I think that Barney Frank, who wrote the legislation, forgot to tell Henry Paulson how to use the money, and then when Henry Paulson got the money, he gave it to Goldman Sachs, and they didn't lend it out here in the United States. That money that we gave to those major banks was led out to China and to India and to Dubai and, of course, to Spain, and then part of it was used to finance a baseball stadium. When are the American people going to wake up and realize this whole thing is a scam? What are your thoughts, Bob?
Well, I think everybody on Wall Street in Washington knows. And so the American public, half of them are illiterate, so they don't know anything. And so you get half of the people who have an idea what's going on, and probably out of that maybe 20% understand it. And so we've got something like 80% of the population doesn't have a clue to what's being done to them.
And, of course, what they're really doing is in the process of destroying the value of our currency and impoverishing our people. We'll be right back. Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, and of course we're just talking with Bob Chapman about the greatest transfer of wealth that has ever taken place in all of history. In fact, Paul Volcker recently, Paul Volcker, a member of the Trilateral Commission, certainly the honorary the chairman of the Northern California chapter of the Trilateral Commission, a chief of the Group of 30, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, former director of or chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. Paul Volcker recently said that the financial crisis we're seeing is the greatest financial crisis in all time, in all history. There's never been a financial crisis compared with the financial crisis we're involved in today. And he ought to know he's part of the group that orchestrated this whole incredible collapse of our economy, certainly the collapse of our currency, and of course the impoverishment of our people. But they're not about to tell the American people what they're doing is taking our money and transferring it to the people of great wealth, and in the process of destroying the value of our currency, they will certainly destroy the very foundation of this nation. Go right ahead.
Well, I think you're absolutely right in your assessment of Volcker's statement and his connections. He's at the top, so to speak. And when you don't have opposition, you create it. People who are in power don't just want one side of the story. And in creating this opposition, you control it. And so this is what Volcker is all about. He belongs to the group of bad guys, and he's sent up there to put up an antithesis, a statement that, this is terrible and it's going to get worse and this is the worst in history. And, of course, he's right, and I'm sure he likes being the person who calls it the way it is. But the point is that keeps people like you and I, Stan, and other commentators away from saying that all of this is disastrous, like Volcker said. And so we don't get a chance to expose what Volcker and all of those people are all about, and all the other things that they're doing. It's just like you're seeing now on Fox. This is an effort to take over the reins of the right and run around and tell people, woe is me, we get terrorists hiding behind every stump, and that means anybody who happens to have a gun, or anybody who likes or voted for Ron Paul. We want them harassed and eventually put out of the way. And so this is part of this antithesis, the antithesis, the Hegel, the Feuerbach, the mounting of a whole